Do you remember the first time Hill Street Blues pulled you into its chaotic, crowded precinct? In the 1980s, the series redefined television with raw realism and characters who felt painfully human. But here's the twist no one saw coming. Behind the legacy came quiet deaths, sudden accidents, and cast members who disappeared, or even changed their names, just to escape the lives fame left behind. Stay tuned as we find out their new transformation in 2026. Kiel Martin as Detective J.D. LaRue Detective J.D. LaRue, the volatile, self-sabotaging investigator in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was played by Kiel Martin. At 37 years old, he joined the series in 1981. That age placed him at a dangerous crossroads. Talented, experienced, and already worn thin. From his first appearance, LaRue felt less like fiction than confession. Kiel Urban Muller, professionally known as Kiel Martin, was born July 26, 1944 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and carried instability into every phase of his career. Early film work such as The Panic in Needle Park and Trick Baby showed promise, but momentum never stabilized. Addiction followed him from project to project, turning auditions into liabilities and contracts into ticking clocks. He was fired, rehired, and quietly passed over, watching peers advance while he fought himself. Work became both refuge and trigger. On Hill Street Blues, LaRue's alcoholism mirrored Martin's own struggles so closely that producers eventually forced intervention. He was temporarily removed from episodes, sent into rehabilitation under threat of permanent dismissal. Though he returned sober, the emotional toll lingered. Physically, his body bore years of abuse. Then came the devastating diagnosis in 1990, lung cancer, discovered after chest pain forced him off stage during a live production of Biloxi Blues. Chemotherapy followed, draining what little strength remained. Sadly, Kiel Martin died at 46 years old on December 28, 1990, at his home in Rancho Mirage, California, from cardiovascular collapse caused by lung cancer. There was no traditional funeral. He requested cremation, with his ashes scattered during a private gathering of friends. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at approximately $500,000, much of it consumed by medical care, leaving behind a performance etched with suffering that television never softened and time never erased. Daniel J. Travanti as Captain Frank Furillo. Captain Frank Furillo, the restrained, burdened authority figure in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was portrayed by Daniel J. Travanti. He was 41 years old when he first stepped into the role in 1981. His age mattered because Furillo was written as a man already worn down by responsibility rather than lifted by power. Every scene carried the weight of decisions made too often and thanked for too rarely. Daniel J. Travanti, born March 7, 1940 in Kenosha, Wisconsin, entered television success carrying years of professional frustration. However, his career moved slowly, defined by guest roles and near breakthroughs that never fully arrived. He worked constantly, yet felt unseen, a condition that quietly corrodes confidence. Projects like Route 66 and Who Killed Teddy Bear gave exposure, but not stability. And by the late 1960s, the gap between effort and reward became emotionally unbearable. The pressure manifested internally long before the public noticed. Travanti slipped into severe alcoholism, a private battle fueled by isolation rather than excess. In 1973, the strain broke through physically when he collapsed during a stage performance, shaking uncontrollably and leaving the stage in tears. Treatment followed, not as triumph, but survival. When Hill Street Blues arrived years later, roles in Adam, 1983, and Murrow, 1986, further echoed performances shaped directly by lived pain. Today, Daniel J. Travanti is 86 years old. He quietly withdrew from acting after his final appearance in 2019, choosing health and solitude over visibility. With an estimated net worth of around $4 million, earned steadily rather than extravagantly, his legacy rests not on quantity, but gravity, proof that endurance, not spectacle, can leave the deepest mark. Michael Conrad as Sergeant Phil Esterhaus. Sergeant Phil Esterhaus, the gravel-voiced veteran who ended every briefing with "Let's be careful out there" in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was portrayed by Michael Conrad. At 56 years old, he joined the series in 1981. The age was not incidental. It shaped Esterhaus as a man already worn thin by decades of duty. Authority came from experience, not energy, and the weight showed in every scene. Michael Conrad, born October 16, 1925 in New York City, entered acting late after abandoning a stable career in education, a decision that immediately carried financial and emotional risk. Hollywood did not reward the switch with ease. For years, he moved from one supporting role to another, working relentlessly just to stay visible. They shoot horses, don't they? And The Longest Yard brought recognition, but not security. By the time he landed Del Vecchio, the pressure to finally make it was suffocating, and the fear of slipping back into obscurity never left him. That strain deepened during Hill Street Blues. Conrad's schedule was brutal, the material emotionally heavy, and the expectations relentless. He slipped into depression, exhausted by the responsibility of anchoring scenes while quietly fighting physical decline. Even as he won 2 consecutive Primetime Emmy Awards in 1981 and 1982, his health was deteriorating. The irony was cruel. The role that finally validated his career was also draining the strength he had left. Tragically, Michael Conrad died at 58 years old on November 22, 1983, from advanced urethral cancer during the show's 4th season. His illness forced an abrupt departure, and the writers folded his death into the series itself, a rare and painful tribute. He was survived by his wife Seema, and his estimated net worth of about $1 million reflected a lifetime of hard work rather than excess. René Enríquez as Lieutenant Ray Cayetano. Lieutenant Ray Cayetano, the composed yet isolated Latino commander in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was played by René Enríquez. At 48 years old, he joined the series in 1981. His age gave Cayetano a quiet gravity, a man who had fought his way upward without celebration. On screen, leadership came with solitude rather than applause. René Enríquez was born November 24, 1933, in Granada, Nicaragua, and carried that origin like a burden in American television. Casting rooms repeatedly told him he was too foreign, not American enough to lead, not accented enough to stereotype. Even after visible work in Chico and The Man and films like Bananas, opportunities stalled. The rejection was personal, not professional, and it hollowed him out. Colleagues later recalled how deeply the constant dismissal wounded his sense of worth. On Hill Street Blues, the pain intensified. Enríquez sensed the role slipping away, and when producers eventually reduced his presence, the blow crushed him emotionally. Beneath the professional disappointment, a far more devastating reality was unfolding. He was gravely ill. Though early reports cited pancreatic cancer, his death certificate later revealed complications from AIDS, a diagnosis he shared only with a few trusted colleagues. At a time when stigma was lethal, silence became another form of suffering. René Enríquez died at 56 years old on March 23, 1990, in Tarzana, Los Angeles, after rapid physical decline. His estimated net worth of roughly $800,000 reflected a career constrained by prejudice rather than talent. Trinidad Silva as Jesus Martinez. Jesus Martinez, the sharp-tongued, manipulative gang leader in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was portrayed by Trinidad Silva. He was 31 years old when he first appeared on the series in 1981. His youth gave Martinez a dangerous energy. From the moment he appeared, the character felt volatile, unpredictable, and frighteningly real. Trinidad Silva Jr. was born January 30, 1950, in Mission, Texas, and carried the weight of representation into every audition. Hollywood repeatedly narrowed his range, funneling him into criminal roles because of his Mexican heritage. Work came sporadically, never steadily, forcing him to accept small parts simply to survive. Films like The Jerk and later Colors showed flashes of his versatility, but advancement was blocked by stereotype, not skill. Financial stress became constant, and the fear of being permanently trapped in one image gnawed at him. The pressure intensified even as recognition grew. On Hill Street Blues, Martinez evolved from a throwaway antagonist into a recurring presence, proof of Silva's impact. Yet, off-screen, stability never followed. He juggled auditions, side work, and family responsibility, knowing one missed role could unravel everything. In 1988, while filming UHF, momentum finally seemed to turn, only for fate to intervene with brutal speed. Sadly, Trinidad Silva died at 38 years old on July 31, 1988, in Whittier, California, after a drunk driver ran a red light, hurling him from his truck and killing him instantly. He was buried at San Fernando Mission Cemetery in Los Angeles. His wife and young son survived, carrying the aftermath forward. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was about $300,000, a heartbreaking reminder of how little time Hollywood gave him to escape the roles that confined him. James B. Sikking, as Lieutenant Howard Hunter. Lieutenant Howard Hunter, the rigid, tightly wound tactical commander in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was played by James B. Sikking. He was 47 years old when he joined the series in 1981. His age gave Hunter a brittle intensity. What looked like stiffness on screen was actually strain. James Barry Sikking was born March 5, 1934, in Los Angeles, California, and spent decades fighting invisibility despite relentless work. He was frequently cast as a supporting presence, reliable, precise, but rarely celebrated. Films like Capricorn 1 and The Electric Horseman kept him employed, not fulfilled. Even with Hill Street Blues acclaim and an Emmy nomination, he sensed the ceiling above him. After the show ended, the transition to lighter roles, most notably Doogie Howser, M.D., brought financial stability but emotional dissonance. That quiet disappointment followed him for years. Sikking worked constantly to avoid slipping backward, measuring success not by joy, but by continuity. Behind the scenes, health concerns emerged. Subtle at first, memory lapses, confusion, slow warnings of what was coming. James B. Sikking died at 90 years old on July 13, 2024, in Los Angeles from complications of dementia after a prolonged and painful cognitive decline that weighed heavily on his family. He left behind a career spanning 6 decades and an estimated net worth of around $3 million earned through persistence rather than stardom. In the end, the man who played Control so convincingly lost it piece by piece, far from the spotlight that once defined him. Taurean Blacque as Detective Neil Washington. Detective Neil Washington, the steady, morally grounded partner in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was played by Taurean Blacque. He was 41 years old when he joined the series in 1981. His age gave Washington quiet authority. On screen, he often served as conscience in a world constantly sliding toward chaos. Taurean Blacque, born May 10, 1940 in Newark, New Jersey, carried the invisible weight of race into every professional space he entered. As a black actor in the 1980s television, opportunities were narrow and tightly controlled, with little room for complexity or growth. Even after landing Hill Street Blues, he sensed how easily he could be replaced. Guest roles before and after, on shows like Sanford and Son and later generations, kept him working, but rarely fulfilled. When the series ended, the silence hit hard. Blacque struggled emotionally, slipping into depression, shaken by the sudden loss of structure and relevance that the show had provided. He moved away from Los Angeles, turning increasingly to theater and activism, believing the industry would not change unless challenged. Financial strain followed as he poured resources into social causes and into raising children, often sacrificing personal stability for principle. Finally, Taurean Blacque died at 82 years old on July 21, 2022 in Atlanta, Georgia, after a brief illness. He left behind 12 children, a legacy defined as much by compassion as by performance. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was about $1.5 million, modest for a man who gave so much of himself away, on screen and far beyond it. Barbara Bosson, as Faye Farillo. Faye Farillo, the anxious, emotionally frayed ex-wife in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was portrayed by Barbara Bosson. She was 42 years old when she joined the series in 1981. Her age lent Faye a raw credibility, a woman trapped between resentment and dependence. Each appearance felt like a confrontation rather than a cameo. Barbara Bosson was born November 1, 1939, in Charleroi, Pennsylvania, and spent decades pushing against limits imposed both by Hollywood and proximity to power. Though immensely capable, her career was repeatedly overshadowed by her marriage to producer Stephen Boschko. Critics whispered favoritism, while producers questioned her independence. Even as she earned 5 consecutive Emmy nominations for Hill Street Blues, professional tension mounted rather than eased. The pressure intensified after Boschko's exit from the series. Bosson found her character diminished, her voice sidelined, and negotiations over salary and screen time turning hostile. She walked away mid-run, a risky move that slowed momentum and narrowed future options. Later work on Murder One revived her critical standing, but the industry's memory remained selective, quick to reduce her to context rather than craft. Barbara Bosson died at 83 years old on February 18, 2023 in Los Angeles from natural causes. At the time of her death, her estimated net worth was around $2 million, built through persistence rather than privilege. She left behind performances etched with vulnerability, proof that strength sometimes appears only after being mistaken for weakness. Robert Prosky, as Sergeant Stan Jablonski. Sergeant Stan Jablonski, the abrasive, accident-prone desk sergeant in Hill Street Blues, 1984, was played by Robert Prosky. At 55 years old, he joined the series in 1984. He was stepping into a role born from loss, replacing Michael Conrad under intense scrutiny. From his first scene, Jablonski felt like a man bracing himself against expectations he never asked for. Robert Joseph Prosky was born December 13, 1930, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and spent most of his life believing cinema might never truly want him. For more than 2 decades, he survived on stage work, respected, applauded, but largely unseen by Hollywood. When film opportunities finally came, they arrived all at once and without mercy. Roles in Thief and Christine demanded constant travel and physical endurance, forcing him to adapt quickly in an industry that had already moved on without him. The pressure did not ease with recognition. During and after Hill Street Blues, Prosky worked relentlessly, jumping between television and films like The Natural, Broadcast News, and later Mrs. Doubtfire, afraid that slowing down would end the run he waited half a lifetime to earn. Physical strain accumulated, minor injuries on set, exhaustion brushed aside, warning signs ignored. Sadly, Robert Prosky died at 77 years old on December 8, 2008, in Washington, D.C., from complications following heart surgery, only days before his 78th birthday. His death shocked a family that had watched him work without pause for decades. At the time, his estimated net worth of about $5 million reflected perseverance rather than comfort. Betty Thomas as Officer Lucy Bates. Officer Lucy Bates, the sharp, defiant presence in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was portrayed by Betty Thomas. She was 34 years old when she joined the series in 1981. Her age placed Bates in constant confrontation with authority, fighting for credibility in rooms dominated by men. What unfolded on screen mirrored a deeper struggle off it. Betty Lucille Nienhauser was born July 27, 1947, in St. Louis, Missouri, and entered television carrying both momentum and resistance. Despite critical praise and repeated Emmy recognition, she felt boxed in, praised as an actress, but rarely trusted with control. When Hill Street Blues ended, the loss of structure hit hard, triggering depression and uncertainty about her future. She refused both options. Moving behind the camera came at a cost: doubts from executives, gendered scrutiny, and the burden of proving herself on every set. Early directing work led to larger risks, and films like The Brady Bunch Movie and Private Parts became tests of survival rather than celebration. Even commercial success brought isolation, with victories framed as exceptions instead of validation. As of 2026, Betty Thomas is 79 years old and remains active in the industry, choosing projects selectively after decades of pressure. Her estimated net worth of around $10 million, earned largely through directing, stands as evidence of endurance rather than ease. Lucy Bates was never written as a victim, but the woman who played her paid quietly for every inch of authority she claimed. Bruce Weitz as Detective Mick Belker. Mick Belker, the feral, unpredictable undercover cop in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was portrayed by Bruce Weitz. He was 38 years old when he stepped into the role in 1981. From the first episode, Belker was not written to be liked, but to unsettle, disturb, and linger. That intensity would define Weitz's career for decades. Bruce Peter Weitz was born on May 27, 1943, in Norwalk, Connecticut, and the success of Hill Street Blues came with a hidden cost. Belker became iconic almost overnight, but the character's extremity locked Weitz into a narrow image. Casting directors saw the snarling undercover cop and stopped looking further. Even as he earned acclaim, and later an Emmy, work outside the show became irregular, forcing him to accept smaller, uneven roles while the industry moved on. After the series ended, the struggle intensified. Despite appearances in films like Deep Impact and television roles across NYPD Blue and The X-Files, nothing escaped the long shadow of Belker. Financial pressure mounted, and Weitz later acknowledged periods of unhealthy coping, including mild alcohol dependence, fueled by stress and uncertainty. Today, Bruce Weitz is 83 years old and living a deliberately quieter life, far removed from Belker's chaos. His estimated net worth of around $3 million reflects a career built on one unforgettable role and the difficult aftermath of surviving it. Joe Spano as Lieutenant Henry Goldblum. Henry Goldblum, the thoughtful, burdened conscience of Hill Street Blues, 1981, was played by Joe Spano. At 35 years old, he joined the series in 1981. Unlike flashier characters, Goldblum carried emotional weight quietly. That restraint mirrored the actor who portrayed him. Joseph Peter Spano was born on July 7, 1946, in San Francisco, California, and spent much of his career fighting invisibility rather than failure. During Hill Street Blues, the relentless ensemble format demanded constant presence without guarantees of recognition. Episodes blurred together, exhaustion accumulated, and Spano found himself respected but rarely celebrated. Roles in films like American Graffiti and The Enforcer did little to lift him into leading man territory. When the series ended, fatigue caught up with him. Work continued, NYPD Blue, Murder One, later NCIS, but the repetition of law enforcement roles reinforced a sense of creative confinement. Balancing television with demanding stage work became a necessity rather than a choice, driven by fear that standing still meant disappearing. The strain was not physical illness, but a quieter burnout that shadowed his post-Hill Street years. As of 2026, Joe Spano is 80 years old and still working selectively, most notably remembered by modern audiences for NCIS. His estimated net worth of about $6 million reflects consistency, not spectacle. A career sustained by discipline rather than hype. Michael Warren as Officer Bobby Hill. Bobby Hill, the steady, principled patrol officer in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was portrayed by Michael Warren. He was 35 years old when he joined the series in 1981. His presence brought quiet authority rather than spectacle. But behind that calm exterior was a man rebuilding his entire identity. Michael Warren was born on March 5, 1946, in South Bend, Indiana, and his path to acting began with a painful ending. Once celebrated as an elite college basketball player at UCLA, his professional sports career collapsed early after repeated cuts and lingering physical injuries. The sudden loss of that future triggered depression and deep self-doubt. Transitioning into acting, he faced a different barrier: racial typecasting. During Hill Street Blues, Warren worked under constant pressure to prove he belonged. Even as the show thrived, opportunities outside it remained uncertain. Appearances in Paris, The White Shadow, and later City of Angels kept him working, yet the fear of being quietly replaced never left. Old sports injuries resurfaced, adding chronic pain to an already demanding schedule. Now, Michael Warren is 80 years old and living largely out of the spotlight, having stepped away from acting. His estimated net worth of around $5 million reflects two careers, one that ended too soon, and another built slowly through resilience. Charles Hayde, as Officer Andy Renko. Andy Renko, the intense, emotionally volatile partner in Hill Street Blues, 1981, was played by Charles Hayde. At 38 years old, he took on the role in 1981. Renko was written to unravel slowly, episode by episode. That unraveling demanded everything from the actor portraying him, Charles Maurice. Hayde III was born on June 2, 1943, in San Francisco, California, and his success came at a price. While Hill Street Blues elevated his profile, the workload was relentless. Long hours, overlapping storylines, and emotional extremes. Financial instability from earlier years made it impossible to slow down. Even as films like Altered States and The House of God expanded his resume, exhaustion became routine rather than exception. After the series ended, Hayde pivoted toward directing, believing it offered control he never felt as an actor. Instead, it introduced a new strain. Balancing acting with directing on shows like ER, NYPD Blue, and later Criminal Minds led to near burnout, with years of constant production leaving little recovery time. Today, Charles Hayde is 83 years old and largely retired from regular directing work. His estimated net worth of about $4 million reflects longevity rather than comfort, a career sustained by endurance. Andy Renko burned hot and fast on screen. The man behind him carried that intensity for decades, quietly paying the cost in fatigue and sacrifice. They once patrolled the streets of Hill Street with raw intensity, broken dreams, and unfiltered realism. But time has rewritten every one of their stories. Some found peace, some paid a brutal price, and some are almost unrecognizable today. Which transformation shocked you the most? And whose story stayed with you long after the screen went dark? Leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe for more haunting then and now stories you won't hear anywhere else.